Ladies and gentlemen, peace to you. In the name of God the Almighty. I will start my speech today with a very important reminder of the reality of the mortal world we live in. We live in a mortal physical space that has its own timer. This space is isolated within the oneness of the eternal space-time. The purpose of this isolation is to create a space for us where we get tested and vetted according to our deeds and intentions. For this test to be perfect and really vetting the qualified from the less qualified and the non-qualified, a shadow world exists in a dimension other than ours. To that world, its own timer and its own rules and interaction with our physical world. Some call that space a spiritual realm or the energy realm, but I prefer to call it the shadow world. I will specify in one coming speech. I will give more explanation and details about the shadow world. But right now, it's important to mention briefly the importance of the shadow world and the mechanism of creating our eternal self. What is the mechanism of creating your eternal self? We live in the physical world with a physical mortal self that consists of a mortal body given life by an eternal soul, and it's also linked by mind and heart and nucleic acids to a shadow self which exists in the shadow world. The shadow self acts as a consultant to our consciousness, and it gets influenced by energetic unseen forces and beings. So every time we are presented by a situation or a problem, our minds consult our shadow selves before taking the final decision. Once the decision is taken, it gets imprinted in the shadow soul that exists in the shadow body. And I should remind you that the soul at death, when death occurs or happens, leaves the body and returns to God with a full record of our deeds and intentions. To explain this procedure in an easy way, I will give you an example from everyday life. Let us say I was looking from the window and I saw an old lady fell suddenly in the street. My mind will consult my shadow mind quickly. I could see that I should go out immediately to help the lady, and my shadow mind confirmed the decision, so I go out to help. Other times, my shadow mind could advise that no, I should not take any action, giving me an excuse like, you don't know her, or she deserves what happens to her, or where is God, or let somebody else help her. I could give in to one of these excuses and decide to change my physical mind and don't go out to help the lady. However, what is recorded is the final decision and not the final action. Because I could have went out to help her to find out that someone else had already helped her before my arrival. But because my intention was really sincere and good, my decision will be recorded as a good deed. It's simple, like any school test. We are presented with a situation or a problem, and how we react to it is the test. The more we take bad decisions, our shadow selves become evil and advise us and give us always the worst advice possible. Another example, a woman could insult three men inside a room. The three of them could have different reaction. One insults her back, the second beats her, the third forgives her. That's why it's impossible to believe that God created us just to have fun or to play games. We are being vetted. Who would have self-control? Who would gain wisdom? Who is merciful? Who is evil? Who is arrogant? Who is ignorant? Who is lazy? And like any test, we will get degrees and levels in eternity. That is the procedure of creating our eternal selves. The more we use our mortal lifetime in gaining knowledge, wisdom, and exercising mercy and justice, caring for nature, animals, and other human beings, raising our voices against injustice and tyranny, the more our degrees will be high and our eternal self will live in God's realm. Some could even become gods themselves. From here comes the necessity of the test. Imagine yourself in the place of God, who worked hard on his emotions to get evil tendencies under control in order to rule with justice and wisdom. Would you create intelligent beings who live for eternity without testing their qualifications and tendencies? God have trillions of worlds and galaxies to sustain. If he shares this rule with unjust and unwise, if he shares his rule with unjust and unwise eternal beings, they could pollute, corrupt, and destroy all the multiverse. Now, what is the good work that help us create a good eternal self? First commandment that all monotheistic religions agree on is to glorify and worship only God the Almighty, and to take no other gods or idols before him or beside him, and do not associate other beings with him, because he wasn't born and he didn't give birth. This is the most important commandment because without it, any creature will lose his way. So God is not some narcissistic figure who wants all the glory and worship for himself for his own satisfaction, but for the sake of the worshippers themselves. Because only by understanding God and his uniqueness and singularity, we can understand the nature around us and the purpose of our mortal lives. Without this strong belief, the doors of true knowledge and wisdom will not be accessible for us. Any knowledge outside belief in God is not a true knowledge, and time will prove it to be a guess or a wishful thinking. To prove to you what I am saying, I personally do have access to a heavenly realm of knowledge that gives my mind telepathically and answers to questions I have on any given topic. The greatest scientist of the 20th century, Nikola Tesla, said, "The gift of mental power comes from God, divine being, and if we concentrate our minds on that truth, we become in tune with this great power." I call Tesla the best scientist of the 20th century because his work gave humanity the best supply of electricity and the basics of the wireless connections and communications, which are the pillars of our modern civilization. While Albert Einstein was also great and a believer in God, but his work was used to create the most destructive weapon that armies possess today. If we remove the scientists who believed in God, the Almighty, from the history of science, we will be left literally with almost nothing of a good use or true knowledge. If we remove the ancient scientists of the Islamic Golden Age during the Middle Ages, or if we remove Galileo Galilei and Leonardo da Vinci and Isaac Newton and Albert Einstein and Nikola Tesla and Michael Faraday and James Maxwell and Gregor Mendel, we will be left with almost nothing of the core of every science. Every person with sane mind can see how fundamental is the belief in God is in gaining knowledge from its original source. The names of the great scientists who believed in God speak for themselves. You know them by their fruits. So God, when commanding us to take Him as one and only divine source of everything, He's doing so in order to show us the right way, the correct path in order for our efforts, thoughts, and experiments to be fruitful. Because without being faithful to God is like building a house without a strong base or pillars. The first storm would destroy it. And that's why every scientific endeavor that is not coming from God, it won't last long. An equation or a theory might survive for a century or two at best, but then a truer one will come to replace it. I explained to you the most important part of the commandments, which many struggle to swallow, because they thought of God like someone who's out there playing games or resonating like any one of them. The more I understand how God created everything and why, the more I feel guilty about wasting many years of my time doing stupid things. After explaining the most important step for me and you in creating our eternal selves, here I give the other commandments that any person with clear consciousness can apply in his mortal life. Treat your parents nicely and respectfully. Never steal. Never commit murder. Never commit adultery. Never yearn for money and possessions. Believe in Judgment Day and the eternal life. Never gossip. Never spy. Never lie. Never attack others, verbally or by force. Never work under orders unless you are 100% sure that your commander is a righteous person who rules with justice and wisdom. Because you can't tell God on the judgment day that you were following orders. Never be a false witness. Be true to yourself, to your God, and to others. Treat others the same way you like to be treated. Be an active part of the collective good. I will speak about the collective good in a coming speech. Treat animals and all that exists in nature with mercy, care, love, and respect. Be clean and do not pollute the environment. Never be a backstabber. Keep your word and promises. If you wronged someone, apologize quickly and try to fix what you broke. Forgive those who treat you badly, because life is short and just a test. It's not worthy of enmity. Love others in God and be sympathetic in God too. After listening to these explanations, do you really still need to get attached to labels and divisions of religions and ideologies? My speech today was a clear guidance to create a good eternal self. Thank you for listening. See you next week.